Hey, how's that work? Yeah. Great. I'll start by just expressing my deep gratitude to the Australian Wooden Boat Festival and our gracious hosts and everyone here. It's fantastic. Everyone in Port Townsend always looking for an opportunity to make it down for this festival and compare it favorably and unfavorably to ours. Yeah, we're all just so stoked on the opportunity to come here. It's been wonderful. You have a really great community around the craft here and so much enthusiasm. It's fantastic to see. Little about me. I was born in Baltimore, Maryland. My father was a boat builder and a rigger, so I grew up early on with an interest in this, and then after some years of traveling and working seasonally, I ended up in Port Townsend, worked on tall ships for a few years, and then had the great luck to wander into the shop of Brion Toss, a pretty well-known rigger there in town, and he sort of became my mentor in rigging as a vocation and has informed a lot of my rigging practice and pedagogy, my time with him. And here I am, and I worked on a few big projects, and the most recent one was Tally-Ho, and that was another very lucky stroke, and that has afforded me opportunities like coming here and doing talks. And don't worry, my talk will go by quickly. I'm mostly just going to show you some pretty pictures and try not to bore you. Just curious, sort of to inform how technically deep I get into some points. Is there anyone here who works as a rigger? Great. Mostly fans. That's awesome. Fantastic. Love that. I also had to rebuild the slideshow last night, so I don't have a lot of the words that on the screen that I had originally put in there. I'll just try and remember the points that I was going to hit. We are not replacers. It was a saying that Brian was fond of, and I think that a lot of the people who find rigging as a vocation, what I think grabs the people who stick with this craft for a long time is that the thing that most people see and have in the front of their mind when they think of rigging, and especially traditional rigging, is the handwork, the objects that we create and the hard skills that are necessary to being a well-rounded rigger, and that's the tip of the spear, so to speak, certainly in terms of awareness of it. But what grabs the people who stick with, like I said, rigging as a vocation, is that there's a real balance of hard and soft skills. I like to say that the real work of rigging is design and analysis, and that is that's the body of work that informs the hard skills. We have a world that is full of thousands and thousands of great aging cruising yachts. We're here to celebrate and talk about and look at wooden boats, but we all know that the vast majority of solid cruising hulls out there are modern cruising craft, and if they don't get re-rigged by their new owners, then they end up just turning into more plastic trash floating around. And a successful re-rig of any vessel of any style includes updating it and bringing it into the new world and keeping it relevant. That's true of old wooden boats just as much as it is, fiberglass yachts from the 70s. And the more, yeah. So the point that I originally conceived that I want to make in this talk is that the advent of modern fiber rigging is keeps traditional skills. It has made the traditional handwork skills newly relevant. I'm just going to stick with the pictures. We're not replacing. Here's a boat that we're all fairly familiar with. This is an Ingrid 38. This is a fiberglass blue water hull that when I was working with Brion, this is a fully served Dyneema rig. These materials feel right at home. Should have brought better notes. The advent of modern high modulus fibers provides a lot of opportunities to solve problems when you're re-rigging a traditional modern vessel that 30 years ago may have had to be solved with expensive custom metalwork, much less accessible. There's so many opportunities to solve problems not just on boats like Tally-Ho, but on all kinds of modern cruising yachts. But these solutions are often very skill intensive. It's a steep learning curve to climb, and I think that there is a dearth among young people entering the craft, finding rigging as a vocation. I would like to see more opportunities for people working in normal boat yards and learning about rigging, who are learning on Kearney swedge machines and slapping new rigs in new stainless steel rigs. It takes a lot of ingenuity and practice to refine some of the old world techniques that I'm going to show you examples of and use them to their best effect in a modern rig. And a big part of my rigging practice that is heavily informed by Brion's pedagogy is including the sailor, the user of the rig, as an integral component of the design of the rig. But that doesn't mean that we are trying to turn every sailor into a rigger. It's a separate skill set. But there's lots of examples of old world techniques that, when they are practiced and the more refined the practice of applying these techniques, the more places that they become relevant in a modern rig. A great example is the humble lashing. You'll see if you look at the small boats out here, there's a lot of really well done Dyneema rigs in small, traditionally rigged wooden boats out here at the festival, and you'll see a lot of shrouds and stays done up with lashings instead of expensive, vulnerable metal turnbuckles. But even in larger vessels, strategically applied, there's a lot of places where lashings can be very effective. This is Tally-Ho's forestay. It's a very highly loaded piece of rigging on quite a large rig, but it's possible to set this up with a lashing instead of a turnbuckle, because if you get the length of this stay right before tuning the rest of the rig, it can be set up by hand. You don't need a big, you know, maybe $1,000 bronze turnbuckle here that, you know, makes it more difficult to get the sail down close to the stem, on and on. There's a lot of places. The bobstay is another great place. Even on a modern, highly tuned performance yacht, where there's 100 reasons that something like a lashing replacing a turnbuckle can make sense. But even though this is a very simple concept and it appears simple, setting it up properly so that it's possible to tension sufficiently by hand, and setting it up in a way that is you know, robust and reliable takes skills. And yeah, my point is to encourage riggers to incorporate more of these traditional techniques into their practice and learn them. You can also see, this is one of our headsail halyard blocks, and you can see the, I'll talk a little bit more about how these strops were made for the different types of blocks on tally-ho, but you can see a structural seizing here. So seizing versus lashing. It's a small list of techniques, but again, the more refined the practice of applying them for a rigger, the more diverse the application becomes. What do I have next? This is a rig that I built for the Felicity Ann, which was the boat sailed by Ann Davison, the first solo transatlantic, the first single-handed transatlantic trip by a woman, done in the boat that was restored at the Port Townsend School of Wooden Boat Building, and I was lucky to build the rig for it. So here's, again, you can see the creative application of, you know, again, it's just a parallel skill set, learning to work with these new materials, but they can be very much at home and create very long-lasting and elegant solutions to places where, before the advent of these modern fibers, you know, the metal work that would have to be done, and you know, you can have a very light impact on things like wooden spars by creative use of the modern materials. This is a masthead of the same rig, and Felicity Ann. Here's just more examples. This is my 2-speed 4-to-1, 8-to-1 handy billy that I set up. This is kind of a complicated set of lashings. Each block is lashed independently through the strong point there, and this replaces Harkin. Last time I looked, the Harkin 4-to-1, 8-to-1 main sheet system, I think, costs about $1,800 all in. This is maybe $150 worth of blocks and a little creative application of old world skills and a little bit of custom metal work, but you know. So here's a little bit of what I'm talking about. This is Terry Barr. He's a Disney rigger. This guy is a very skilled rigger, but he's a rope access technician and a stage rigger. And he's here setting up a seizing for the Columbia Disneyland. And yeah, people are able to learn new skills and learn how to apply these things properly. And here's the completed vessel. There's another nice example. This is about a 9-inch deadeye in solid Delrin for the Columbia of Disneyland, and there's Brion doing a little final inspection on the finished vessel. You can go to Disneyland in California and see a genuine Brion Toss tall ship rig. These are some hooks. There's things that I would like to see brought back into use for modern vessels. This is an example. Hooks are a thing that you see everywhere on old world rigs, and the hooks that are easy to buy now that are made to interact with chain and slings are they're not as useful on ships because they don't interact with rope. They don't have the best geometry to interact with rope. You can find good hooks in galvanized steel, but we had a local blacksmith make these to my specifications out of bronze, and yeah, use them for hanging blocks. But this is the real value. This is a hook hitch or a black wall hitch. This is an extremely simple hitch. This is what we use to set up the reef tackle on tally-ho, but you can imagine lots of places where this could be useful on a modern cruising boat, even if just for a handy billy, for helping with halyards, rescues. This hitch is extremely quick and easy to set up. This will break before it slips. But if some company out there made hooks like this out of stainless steel, I would start putting them on modern cruising boats in a few different places, but they're hard to find. And this is one of Tally-Ho's peak halyard blocks and forestay eye here. People who have dabbled in making little stuff for their boat with spectra will be aware of the frustrations of making good grommets with spectra. They have their issues, especially making small ones. Anytime you make a grommet with spectra, you end up with a really thick portion. A grommet just being a continuous full-strength loop of rope. All the grommets for tally-hos, blocks, and other parts of the rig I made as selvagees. This is another old world technique that is extremely relevant with these materials. This is a super economical way to make a loop out of spectra because the same mass, so to speak, of the little skinny spectra is actually more cost efficient, easier to work with than getting the same strength out of a single piece. And set up like this, you maintain a lot more of the strength than if you splice one thick piece of spectra into a loop. And this is the splice in that continuous piece. So you see how little diameter it adds to the overall strop. And for tally-ho, I served all these grommets, and you can see the evolution of my little serving mallet here. But again, I mean, you can start to think of places where this would be useful, and it doesn't have to be the service. You can build one of these in a piece of woven Dyneema chafe sleeve, which we also did in a few places on tally-ho. But yeah, made a ton of these for tally-ho, and once this is in your toolbox, they become fairly efficient to build too. And if you compare this to, making custom metal hardware for blocks or cobbling things together out of shackles, it just leads to more elegant and economical solutions for the issues of rig. Here's another tally-ho block. This is a tail block. And yeah, started with single pieces of spectra that I unlaid and wove together. My dream for this, prepare for this talk, was to set up a few examples of these types of blocks and have break tests done so I could have numbers, but I guess that would have just put more people to sleep if I had a bunch of numbers to yap about. So we built quite a few of these tail blocks to hang up in the rig. Try to, especially in Tally-Ho's rig, with the spruce spars, we were trying to make as few penetrations through the skin of the spar as we could. Again, you know, part of keeping these boats relevant, it's like Leo mentioned that we have a much higher standard for workmanship in modern wooden vessels, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is because, you know, the materials get more and more expensive to build and maintain these boats, and it's not just because of big yew and pine lining the CEO's pockets. It's because these materials are more and more clearly finite resource in our world, and it's to even justify to ourselves keeping these boats around for more than our own gratification. I mean, everyone working on wooden boats now is aware of the imperative of making things last as long as possible and doing things in a way that, you know, you can't replace your spruce mast every 10 years like you once could. Even if you have the money, it's hard to find the trees. So, point being, in Tally-Ho's rig, you know, and in my rigging practice in general, where I can solve an issue with fiber solution rather than more complex metalwork, I try to do so. And this is how a block like that is hung in the rig with a hitch either to a piece of hardware or a soft eye of the stay that it's working for. These are our jib halyard blocks. There's one on each side. The halyard's 2-to-1 and comes down both sides. Yeah, there's the completed block, and this is it in place. Also, the hitch is backed up with a hand seizing. This is looks like this picture has the temporary lashing in place, but hand seizing, a good structural hand seizing can be just as strong as hardware solution and even more long-lasting, more maintainable, but again, skill intensive. These are things that people out there practicing rigging need to, you know, do 10 times in the shop before they get one that they might want to put on a customer's boat. And yeah, here's another halyard block with a soft shackle seized on. Yeah, another example, just refined design. This is a splice that wanted to be made as short as possible because the line runs through a block, and we want to be able to get this hardware as close to the block as possible. So instead of doing a full-length bury, we can make a very short splice that maintains enough of the strength of the material by doing multiple brummels. And I'll just assume that the people who need to know what that means. And then as a stopper to protect the tapered part of the splice from jamming in the block, this is another very old world technique that when you start to think about it, you think of places, even on, you know, a modern fiberglass aluminum spar cruising yacht, can use a stopper on a rope that does not weaken the rope. It's not a knot tied, but we raise a bump midline and tie a Turk's head. This is beautiful, but it is not decorative. Turk's head is just the correct functional knot to use here, and that, you know, will fetch up against the block before your hardware gets to your block and damages it, or keeps a tail long enough for you to reach from deck. There's all kinds of reasons. And of course, this can be, removed and maintained. You can inspect the material underneath. And here is that block in situ on Tally-Ho. These are the lifts, the boom lifts, quarter tackles. And yeah, that knob there keeps the whip from raising up too high and becoming skied or becoming jammed in the turning block up high. Here's another application of one of those grommets that I made as an extension here. Very kind on the surrounding materials. Fiber solutions allows the block to toggle. Much stronger, more lasting than longer lasting than a piece of rope tied with a knot or a piece of metal, custom metal hardware. Very economical and maintainable. Here are dead eyes for Tally-Ho's dead rig. This is the bobstay tackle, and these are the whisker stays. Again, this is all Spectra rigging. Here you can see, to keep this part more flexible, we use that woven Dyneema chafe sleeve where those hitch around the hardware on the Kranz iron. And again, just examples of the creative marriage of old world techniques with modern materials, just getting the best out of both. The traditional fiber that we might have stropped all these blocks and these dead eyes with has a limited lifespan by the nature of the material. And we've always danced with different cost benefits of maintenance interval, lifespan. A lot of people would say that the peak material, 50 years ago, I probably would have agreed with this, the peak rigging technology was galvanized wire, because that is a material that, in theory, has an unlimited lifespan as long as it's properly protected from the elements and properly maintained. It's, galvanized wire covered with service is completely inspectable. The argument for service, depending on the particulars of the rig that you're putting it in over a woven chafe sleeve like this, is that this service can be removed, completely exposing the underlying material for inspection or maintenance, and then repaired, replaced in a way that you can never tell it was removed, which is less possible with this chafe sleeve. And Tally-Ho's head stays are covered with a Dyneema chafe sleeve, which means that they're the most likely part of the, the standing rig to need some kind of replacement or ultimate maintenance in a foreseeable amount of time, because we use soft hanks to hank on the sails up there, but at some point things wear out. We can't replace the fibers. Oh, I see. Okay, I'll run through the last ones. I thought I was going to be quick, sorry. More blocks, just more examples of grommets seized in. Here's a grommet that's covered with that Dyneema chafe sleeve, and it's basically in place of a big, heavy bronze swivel that probably be a few $100s from the Port Townsend foundry. It allows the block to articulate enough. This is a main sheet turning block, turning towards the winches on deck. And here's blocks that need to be able to be removed from the ends of their rigging. So we didn't want to seize them directly into eyes, so this is a much easier way to take them apart. more of the same. I tried to get every picture in there and show people a couple pictures of Tally-ho. And I know what the people want. Eye candy, right? This is, that's Tally-ho's topmast head. That's what's going on up there. It's a little busy, but everything has a function. This is a Gantlin. So I was just going up there to see this one of the last things. But here's more of those. Here on one side you have the tail block for the halyard, turning it back down to deck, and on the other end, the bitter end of the halyard is seized on. And then you have the block attached to the head of the sail that gets hoisted up there. Again, fiber solutions. This is less things stacked up here, less little short bits of structural rigging that we had to build, and of course, this little custom, expensive, hard to maintain metal hardware solutions up there as possible. No penetrations through the spar involved here, right? And it's the last picture. This is just the first batch of soft tanks for the head sails. And this is, again, even these, simple. I mean, most people are familiar with soft shackles at this point, and this is, these are an order of magnitude more complicated to build and get right. These are a figure-8 soft shackle that has one part that stays attached to the sail and then comes around and closes on itself. But it's, again, these things are really skill-intensive. They can be learned, but this is, part of the library of skills that really fits well into a well-rounded modern rigger's toolbox, and it's all about adapting these old world techniques to the modern materials. And yeah, I don't have as neat a wrap up to my talk as Leo did. These are so elegant. I'm not as good at this as he is. But I'm happy to field any overflow questions that people have about Leo, by the way. You've been holding on to those. Or about this.